this time next week, we're going to be exactly 50% of the way through the semester already. So, first of all, I want to do a little bit, just a teeny little bit of review on what we talked about last class. And then I will address some questions related to the two sections on, let's say, page 7 that you had for today. And then after that, we're going to go on and talk about other types of intervals, specifically the other modifiers that we have for intervals, like major and minor intervals, and augmented and diminished intervals. And I understand that this material might be not the most entertaining or exciting in the world, but these, again, are really crucial, fundamental, basic concepts and pieces of knowledge that you need to really understand music for, for your major and for whatever you decide to do with music after you graduate. So it's really good that you guys are so young. It's good that you're taking the time to learn this now, because you have your whole life ahead of you. Anyways, so last class we talked about one modifier. What was the one type of interval or modifier we talked about last class? Perfect intervals, that's right. And perfect intervals are used only in connection with 4 interval sizes. That is, perfect intervals applied to unisons. Perfect is referred to, we apply it to fourths. We apply it to fifths, and we apply it to octaves. We don't call unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves major or minor or anything like that. Nor do we say that there's something like a perfect second or third or sixth or seventh. Perfect is just reserved for the unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves. In last class, we related the perfect intervals to the major and or the minor scales, where these intervals are found between scale degree 1 and scale degree 4, scale degree 1, scale degree 5, scale degree 1, scale degree 8, even between, which seems like it seems confusing, but even the space between scale degree 1 and itself, which is no space at all. We call that a perfect unison. Okay? Now, by thinking of the bottom note of an interval as scale degree 1, let's say of a major scale, we learn not only how to construct perfect intervals above a given note, but we also learn how to tell whether or not a unison, fourth, fifth, or octave are indeed perfect, or whether they are not perfect. Okay? So just to jog your memory, let's spell a few perfect intervals above these 4 notes here. For me, what I would do for this one here, if I wanted to spell a perfect fourth or find the note, a perfect fourth above an A, I would think of an A major scale. That's what I would do. We think of A as scale degree 1. And I would think to myself, what is scale degree 4 in an A major scale? Because whatever scale degree 4 is, that note is going to be exactly a perfect fourth above an A. And I come to the conclusion that the fourth scale degree in A major is D. D is in dog. So I know that a perfect fourth above an A has to be a D. Not a D sharp, not a D flat, not any other kind of Swahili D or whatever you want to make up. It's got to be this kind of D. Okay? So let's use the same approach for the next 3 here. A perfect fifth above F sharp. I don't remember if I did these in class last time. Now I'm familiar with them. Okay. So think of an F sharp major scale. What is scale degree 5 in an F sharp major scale? Or you could think of F sharp minor, it doesn't matter. Who knows?
The C sharp.
The C sharp, that's right. So that means C sharp is the exact note, exactly a perfect fifth above an F sharp. That's that distance there. Space between the notes F sharp and C sharp is known as a perfect fifth. A perfect fifth above D flat. Think of a D flat major scale and try to identify in your mind what scale degree 5 would be. D, E, F, G. A, right? A flat. Okay. So that means A flat would be a perfect fifth above D flat. And finally, what do we do when the bottom note of our interval doesn't serve as the first note of a major scale?
Just pretend that it's.
Say that one more time.
Just get rid of accidental.
Yeah, just hide or take away, temporarily remove the accidental. And let's do that. So now let's think of the B major scale. What note is scale degree 4 in a B major scale? You come up with E. Okay, I come up with E as well. But the original note was B sharp, so we reapply the accidental to both notes like this, and we say that since B natural to E natural is a perfect fourth, therefore B sharp to E sharp must also be a perfect fourth. Does anyone have any questions on that? All right. Now, let's take a look at page 7 in the workbook. And let me tell you, first of all, that if you're paying attention to your assignment sheet, you'll notice that the assignment that's due on Friday includes some sections from workbook page 8, 7, and 8. And for the majority of you, if you have the actual workbook, that means page 8 is on the back side or the flip side of page 7, right? So that means I should not and cannot collect page 7 yet. Can't collect it today. But I will be collecting on Friday page 7 and 8, because those you can tear out, and that's of your book, and those will be kept together. But I do want to check to see if anyone has any questions about problems in section A, exercise 1.4a on page 7, or exercise 1.5a, because that was assigned for today. And to get the numeric size of intervals and to get the understanding of perfect intervals, now's a good time to ask questions about those before we add more information to it. So did you understand in exercise 1.5a you're supposed to put a P in the space only if the interval is exactly a perfect interval? I guess the other ones you can either put an X or you can just leave the space blank. I'll get the right idea when I end up grading these towards this coming weekend. Anyone have any issues with any of them that you want to ask about? That's fine with me. You guys are a good, easy class. We can just move on to the new information. So I will be collecting page 7 and 8 from your workbook on Friday. Just while I have that out and I'm thinking about it, you have to do example 1.5b for Friday, but you only have to do, careful, pay attention to the assignment sheet, you only have to do numbers 1 through 10 in section B. Don't do all of them. And then in section C on page 8, you only have to do numbers 1 through 25. Because, oh my gosh, there's 60 problems in section C. So, I mean, you could if you wanted the extra practice, but you don't need to. Just do numbers 1 through 25. And then the last part of the assignment for Friday is section A on the top of page 9. And you only have to do numbers 1 through 10 there. So just as long as you're paying attention, following the assignment sheet, you won't, hopefully it won't take you like 3 hours to complete that assignment or anything. Hopefully it'll take you just 1 hour at the most, if that. All right, so moving on. Right now we're going to go in to talk about some of the other modifiers, the major and the minor intervals. And I had told you last class that there are only 5 modifiers possible for interval names. There's the P for perfect, capital M for major intervals, lowercase m for minor intervals, the plus sign for what we call augmented intervals, and finally the little circle or a degree symbol for diminished intervals. Those are the 5 modifiers that we place out in front of our interval size to complete the interval name. Now the terms major and minor are modifiers used only in connection with seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. So When we're talking about major and minor intervals, they only apply to the interval sizes seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. So as I said before, seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths it can never be called perfect. They must be called either major or minor. All right. Now, how do we know what the precise size that these modifiers, major and minor, what is the precise size for these seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths? Well, major, seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths all occur in the major scale, where they are found between scale degree 1 and scale degree 2, scale degree 1 and 3, scale degree 1 and 6, and then of course scale degree 1 and 7, respectively. So let me see if I can just diagram that or show you that. You can think of or find the distance of a major second by thinking of a major scale. The distance between scale degree 1 and scale degree 2 in any major scale is always a major second. The distance between scale degree 1 and scale degree 3 in a major scale is always going to be a major third. The distance between scale degree, let's see, I'm going to try to move this up. Scale degree 1 and scale degree 6 in a major scale is known as a major sixth interval. And finally, the distance between scale degree 1 and scale degree 7 in a major scale is referred to as a major seventh interval. So as with perfect intervals, if we consider the bottom note of an interval as scale degree 1 of a major scale, we can build and recognize major intervals by thinking of the appropriate scale degree. So it's not that complicated or confusing of a concept. I think it's just remembering your major scales and being able to calculate and compute the right scale degrees correctly in order to get the interval size correct. Let's do a few of those right now. Make some space on the stack up here. How about, go to the bass clef. Here's an F sharp. And I need to know what note is a major second above an F sharp. What I would recommend is I would think of an F sharp major scale and ask yourself, what is scale degree 2 in an F sharp major scale? Who knows what scale degree 2 is?
G sharp.
That's right, G sharp. Okay? So G sharp is the answer. And by the way, one thing I want you to know about when you notate or you write intervals of a second, you kind of have to stagger or offset the notes a little bit. The higher note of a second always goes to the right. And then just make sure you have, and I'm not going to be so picky about the accidentals as to where they are, but as long as you make sure that the accidental for your note is on the right space or line, I think that's going to be clear enough, and I can understand and read that as F sharp and G sharp. The only thing I don't want you to do when you notate intervals as small as a second is this. You don't want to try to put the G sharp like right there. That's really hard to read, it's confusing. So what we do in music traditionally is intervals of a second. The higher note always goes to the right. And if you need an accidental on both, that's fine. Just give yourself some space and make sure that your accidentals are on the right line or in the right spaces. And I'll be able to read what you've written. So G sharp is a major second above an F sharp. That's right. What is another name that we spoke of or talked about last unit that's the same distance as a major second?
Whole step.
That's right, a whole step. A major second is equivalent in distance to a whole step. So again, if you go back to the keyboard, you think about the piano, anytime you find, you think of, or you find a whole step on the keyboard, that's also a major second. A major second. I'm sure I've asked this before, but I'm assuming a lot of you are in some kind of class in piano this semester? No? Yes? Maybe? Some of you are, and maybe not all of you are. But anyways, it really helps my mind to sit at a piano, to look at the piano keys, and to not only find these distances, the distance between these keys, but also play these keys and feel the distances of these intervals. That helps my learning tremendously. I don't know if it helps yours. I would think it must. It must. It can't hurt. Can't hurt. Okay, let's try another one. Let's see, we got the bottom note of an interval is a B flat. And I need to know what note is a major sixth above a B flat. So think of a B flat major scale. And what is scale degree 6?
A G.
A G. Not G sharp, not G flat, just plain G. So I know that G natural or G is a major sixth above a B flat. Always has been, always will be. Let's do a few more. How about, yeah, I'm in the bass clef. How about an E? That's my bottom note, and I need to know what note is a major seventh above an E. What is scale degree 7 in an E major scale? You know?
The D sharp.
D sharp. So that means the answer would have to be here. D sharp is a major 7th above an E. And the last one I have, oh, this one's gonna, I hope it doesn't throw you for a loop. Let's say the bottom note of my interval is D sharp. And I need to know what note is a major 3rd above a D sharp. We can use the same approach or apply the same process as we do with perfect intervals as we do with these. In other words, D sharp is not, there is no such thing as a D sharp major scale. So I can't really think of D sharp as the first degree of a major scale to solve this. But I can temporarily remove the accidental. What note is a major 3rd above D natural? Or think of a D major scale. What pitch is scale degree 3 in D major?
G.
Count again.
F.
F what though, in a D major scale?
It's just, oh no, it's F sharp, sorry.
That's right, F sharp is scale degree 3 in a D major scale. That means that F sharp is, let me get this one off of here. F sharp is a major 3rd above a D. Because F sharp is scale degree 3 in a D major scale. But my original problem was D sharp. So if I put a sharp back on the D, don't I also have to add a sharp to the top note as well? Yeah, so you might say, well, can I just do this? And I would say close but no cigar. How do we notate a double sharp?
Well, X.
That's right. So really, the final answer for this is going to be a major 3rd above D sharp is this pitch, F double sharp. I hope I don't lose anyone or confuse anyone with that process. So far, are there any questions about how to find major intervals, spell major intervals above a given note? All right. Now, we also know that seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths can be called minor intervals. And most of these intervals are found in the between scale degrees in the natural minor scale. The natural minor scale. Most of them are. So, for instance, minor thirds, sixths, and sevenths occur between scale degrees 1 and 3, 1 and 6, and 1 and 7 of a natural minor scale. So here's my natural minor scale. And the distance between scale degrees 1 and 3 is a minor third. The distance between scale degrees 1 and 6 in a natural minor scale is called a minor sixth. And the distance between 1 and scale degree 7 in a natural minor scale is known as a minor seventh. But which one of those four numeric sizes up there does not appear even in the minor scale?
The second.
Yeah, we do not get a minor second between scale degrees 1 and 2 in a minor scale. We just don't. A minor second, as we should know, hopefully by now, is the same as a half step. And it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with a major scale or a minor scale, the distance between scale degrees 1 and 2 is always a major second. A major second. Okay? But we can deduce and conclude, well, yeah, we don't get the minor second out of the natural minor scale. So we can't use that for comparison. But rather than using minor scales to help you spell, thinking of minor scales to help you spell minor intervals above a given note, I'm going to give you some piece of information that's way more important. And that is this. If a major interval is made a half step smaller without altering its numerical name or its numerical size, then it becomes a minor interval. Another way of saying that is, if you have, for instance, a major third and you have a minor third, because they have the same size, the numeric size, I can tell you that this interval here is exactly a half step less space or a half step smaller than this interval. Because major intervals are always a half step larger than minor intervals, and the reverse is true. Minor intervals are always a half step smaller than major intervals of the same number. And that is what I'd like you to use really to start calculating how to spell and recognize minor intervals. I would like you to think of the major interval first and then just lower the note a half step or shrink the distance between the two pitches by a half step, and you'll have a minor interval with the same number. Okay? So again, if a major interval is made a half step smaller without changing its numerical or chromatic, then it becomes a minor interval. So let's try spelling a few minor intervals using this, what I just said, using that information. I'll go back to treble clef. Okay, let's say I've got C sharp and a major sixth above C sharp is A sharp. I'm giving you that one, that's true. Now, how could I make this interval a minor sixth? What would I do to the A, what could I do or should I do to the A sharp to make it a minor sixth?
Make it natural.
Yeah, A natural. If I make the distance that's a major sixth, C sharp to A sharp, if I make it a half step smaller, then I've automatically got a minor interval of the same numeric size, a minor sixth. Okay. So again, if you think about the piano, it can be helpful. If a major sixth is so and yay big, so and so, if I take the top note and if I lower it just a half step, I've decreased the amount of space in between those two pitches by a half step. So major then becomes minor. Okay. And I believe, I'm trying to think how I think through the process. I believe I spell and recognize minor intervals using this very approach, this very method. I think of a major interval first, and then I just shrink it by a half step, and that gives me the minor interval. So, for example, let's say I've got the interval D to E, which is a major second. How can I turn that into a minor second? D to what kind of E?
Flat.
E flat, that's right. And did I mention the minor second is the half? Yeah, I think I mentioned that. The half, same as the half step. Now, the next thing I'm going to say sometimes throws students, confuses students, kind of makes their mind explode. I'll tell you that besides the unison, any interval can be made smaller two different ways. Let me go, let's see, how do I, well, no, you know, before I do that, let's just practice filling a few more minor intervals without the major interval. Let's say, who can tell me what note is a minor third above a G? I'm backtracking just a little bit and then I'm going to move forward.
B flat.
Yeah, and how do you know that? What thought process did you use to come up with that? Did you compare it to a G minor, the third degree of a G minor scale, or did you think of what a major third above G was first and then lower it?
Yeah, I thought about a major third.
Yeah, I think that's the way I do it. I know that a major third above G is B natural, plain B. So if I just lower that B a half step, make it B flat, then that's got to be a minor third, and it is. How about, what note is a minor sixth above an E flat? Any volunteers? Yeah.
G flat.
Not D. You got the wrong pitch letter. D would be some sort of seventh above. So, yeah, C flat. So, first of all, a sixth above an E flat is some sort of C. E, F, G, A, B, C, right? It's got to be some sort of C. I know that. Now, E flat to C natural is a major sixth, because C is the sixth scale degree in an E flat major scale. So how would I spell a minor sixth then? If E flat to C natural is a major sixth, then if I shrink the distance by a half step, E flat to C flat must be a minor sixth. And it is indeed. Okay, now let me go back to the part that I was going to tell you that could potentially, well, it's not going to blow your mind, but it could potentially produce a little problems. Besides the unison, any interval can be made smaller not only by lowering the top note, but you can also make the distance between two notes smaller by raising the bottom note. That's a pretty heavy-duty, hefty concept. And I know some of my students in the past, I don't know if that ever really connects with them, or if they ever quite get that or understand that. But for instance, like if I've got two things that are yay distance apart, I can shrink the distance between them by taking the top and moving it down, but I can also lower or decrease the distance between them by taking the bottom one and shoving it up, right? That's true about intervals. So, for example, we know the relationship between major and minor intervals. Minor intervals are always a half step smaller in distance than major intervals. But what if I had, excuse me, what if I had something like this? I have an A to a G sharp, and I know I'll tell you that is a major seventh. How can I change that interval into a minor seventh without altering or changing the top note?
You raise the bottom to a sharp.
Okay, yeah. Isn't that weird? We're going from a major interval to something a half step smaller, a minor interval, but in order to do that, we're taking the bottom note and we're raising it. To a lot of students, that seems contrary. They think, oh, I need to lower it to make it... No, but if you take the bottom note and you raise it, you actually shrink the distance between the two pitches. So you're right. So to make this a minor seventh without changing the top note, let's say the G sharp is fixed in indelible ink or etched in stone, you can't change it. Then what I have to do is I have to raise the bottom note a half step, and I've now made that major seventh and a minor seventh. Yeah.
So So how do you know when to do that, or does it matter what note you change?
It doesn't matter what note you change, I don't think, if you have the freedom to do either. Sometimes though, like on a problem in the workbook or whatever, you'll get one that's fixed, and you'll only be able to move the other one. So you've got to be careful as to, okay, what's my aim goal here? I'm actually trying to make the distance between these two pitches smaller. If I can't change the top one, then I have to raise the bottom one to decrease the distance between them. So yeah, I have to look at the problems. Most of the time, I think you have the option. But you need to know that either one can be shifted in case one is fixed and you can't move the other one. Yeah. Good, that's a good question. Can we try one more of these? Let's go to this one here. F to G, the major second. I need you to tell me how to write this interval. Turn it into a minor second, but you can't alter or adjust the top note at all. You know?
You make the F a sharp, F sharp.
That's right. F sharp to G is going to be a minor second. All right. This knowledge here is going to come in handy in later classes and as we work further with intervals. Okay? It's really helpful to know that. Who knows where we're going to see it next? I bet you we see it sooner than I expect. Does anyone have any questions now so far about any major or minor seconds, thirds, sixths, or sevenths? Okay. Then let's go on and talk about augmented and diminished intervals. Those are the last modifiers that we need to discuss. And then we've really discussed all the possible intervals. Okay. Let's see, do I want to use, how do I want to say this? Perfect intervals, if they're made a half step larger or smaller, they can become augmented or diminished. Major intervals, if they're made a half step bigger, can become augmented, and minor intervals, if they're a half step smaller, become diminished. So really, any interval. I guess what I'm trying to say is, let me take that back and just kind of say it straightforwardly. Any numeric size interval can be augmented or diminished. Any interval except for the unison. I might have mentioned that last class. The unison may not be diminished because there's no such thing as less than zero space between our two pitches. Okay? So if a perfect or major interval is made a half step larger without changing its numerical name, it becomes augmented. And if a perfect or minor interval is made a half step smaller without changing its name, it becomes diminished. And I've got a handout, a little half-sheet handout, hopefully that will illustrate this and help you understand the relationship between augmented and diminished intervals with the rest. So take one of these, and if I can get it up on the TV, I will in a minute. I used to write this chart out on the board, and I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. It just takes too much time, and it's probably not that clear. This should be clearer. Is that TV on over there?
No.
No. It was originally, but I must have shut itself off. And this is also where I start talking about elevators because I think it's a good illustration. What I'm basically saying is here over on the left side, do you see how in this column it's called unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves? And right in the center of this line is a P standing for perfect unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Well, what I'm saying is that when you're dealing with perfect intervals, there are only basically 3 levels or 3 floors that you can move between. Perfect intervals, if they're made a half step larger, they immediately become augmented. And perfect intervals, if they are made a half step smaller, they immediately become diminished. There are only 3 choices for unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Either perfect, augmented, or diminished. Those are the only 3 floors you can move between on that elevator. Now, on the other hand, seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths, these are the ones that can be normally major or minor. And you can see over on this side, you actually have 4 levels or floors that you can move between when it comes to seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. Okay? And what I'm saying is, you see the capital, well, let me see if I can just reach it right here. See the capital M here? If you take a major interval and you make it a half step larger, it becomes augmented. If you take a minor interval and you make it a half step smaller, it becomes diminished. So, what can we gather from this? Let's say I have a major interval. How many half steps do I need to shrink the distance in order to make a major interval diminished? 2 half steps, yeah. I'm starting here on this floor in the elevator. If I'm starting with a major interval, I have to go down to minor, lower it a half step first, and then lower it another half step again before it finally becomes diminished. Okay? So there are 4 different floors or levels that you go between when you deal with seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths, but only 3 levels, 3 floors that you deal with unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves. And to me, it's kind of like if you think about an elevator. You know, perfect intervals, that's the main floor of your elevator. You can either go up 1 floor or you can go down 1 floor into the basement. But over here with seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths, it's kind of like you have the major interval, that's 1 floor, and the minor interval is right below it, and then there's ones even above and then even below that yet. So I hope that this diagram really, that's the kind of the way I envision it or picture it. And I think if you think about this type of scale or gradation for both perfect intervals and then the major and minor intervals, I think that's going to help you spell and recognize intervals a lot more quickly and know how to manipulate them, rather than just be dealing and confused with so much computation. Yes.
Does it matter again if what note you decide to?
Nope, it doesn't matter. So for instance, if I have a major interval, let's see, and I want to make it a half step larger, to make it augmented, I could either raise the top note or I could lower the bottom note. You see, if I've got a major interval that's yay big, to make it augmented, I just need to increase the size between the notes by a half step. Either lower the bottom note a half step, that'll do it, or raise the top note a half step. That'll also do it. Don't do both, though, at the same time. All right. So, now we have to practice some of these. How about, yeah, let's spell a few of these augmented and diminished intervals above a given note. I'll use the treble clef here. Okay. So I've got G sharp, and I want to know what note is exactly a diminished fifth above. And that's how I write that, diminished fifth. I'll tell you what I do. I still go back to the standard, the main floor. Can fifths be major or minor? Can fifths be major or minor? No, they can only be perfect or minor. So I'm on the perfect scale here. I'm dealing with fifths. Okay. What note is a perfect fifth? I go to the main floor first. What note is a perfect fifth above a G sharp? Does anyone know that?
A B sharp.
It's a D sharp. So a D sharp is a perfect fifth above a G sharp. How would I make it diminished then?
You can lower the top note,
By how far?
by a half step.
That's right.
And just take the sharp off.
That's right. So D sharp, take that sharp off, make it lower to half step to D natural, and boom, that is a diminished fifth. That's that particular size, unique size of interval.
When we're writing it, should we always try to put a natural next to it, or is that
No.
just just put a sharp?
You actually, you don't need the natural, I just did that for clarity. You could leave it just like that and that would be perfectly correct. Okay, let's try another one. I'm starting with an F on the bottom, and I need to know what note is exactly an augmented sixth above an F, and that's how we write that interval, augmented sixth. Well, sixths, are we on the left side of the chart or the right side?
Right side.
The right side, okay? So sixths can't be perfect, they've got to be major, minor, augmented, or diminished. Well, what I would do is I would probably spell or think of what note is a major sixth above an F, and then I'd increase the size by a half step.
D,
Yeah, what note is a major sixth above it?
D.
D. That is a major sixth above F. Okay? Now, again, see, I guess this one is the given one. So what do we do to the D, though, to make the space just a half step larger? We raise it a half step. And so it'll become D what?
Sharp.
D sharp. That's right. So we're saying that F up to D sharp turns out to be an augmented sixth interval. So again, I think you can deal with these intervals no problem if you understand, first of all, are you dealing with the perfect chart over here with only 3 floors, or are you dealing with the major and minor stuff over on the right with 4 floors to go between? And if you know the relationship, it's always just a half step to knock you down to the next interval, or to knock you up to the next interval. Okay, how about this one? This one's a good one to practice. A is the bottom note, and I need to know what note is a diminished seventh. Diminished seventh above an A. Again, seventh. What I do is I think of the major seventh first, whatever note that is, then lower it a half step, that'll make it minor, and then lower it a half step again, and that'll make it diminished. That's how I do that. Does anyone know what note is a major seventh above an A?
G sharp.
Yes, it's G sharp, you're right. Okay. Now let's be careful we don't forget. G sharp is a major seventh. If I lower it to G natural, what kind of seventh do I have?
Minor.
Minor seventh. If I lower it to G flat, now what kind of seventh do I have? Yes, that's right. So that's my final answer. I think it makes sense, you just gotta get used to thinking about it that way. And sometimes I'll use the keyboard too in my mind. A to G sharp is a major seventh, so A to G natural is a minor seventh, and A to G flat must be a diminished seventh then. It's gotta be. Okay. Let's talk about one special augmented interval and one special diminished interval. And let me put that here on the board. I guess I'll do it in the treble clef. There's a special name for the augmented fourth interval and or the diminished fifth interval. By the way, if I play these intervals on the piano, they would sound exactly the same. They are enharmonic. A diminished fifth will sound exactly like an augmented fourth. We'll get into that later. Anyways, the special name for the augmented fourth or the diminished fifth is called a tritone. A tritone. Okay? And those of you that have me for oral skills were already listening for that really dissonant, harsh sound of a tritone. The term tritone is used for augmented fourth or its enharmonic equivalent, the diminished fifth. Just these particular ones right here. And I think maybe I laid room in another class to explain, I think I do, where the term tritone comes from. It actually is a logical term that makes sense. Yeah, well, okay, let me go through them. If I go, let's see, if I go from G. Okay, back in the olden days, we're talking like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the term tone meant whole step. Refer to a whole step. What note is a whole step above a G? A, right? What note is a whole step above an A? B. And what note is a whole step above a B?
C sharp.
C sharp. So you see how when you go 3 whole steps up from a note, G to C sharp, that's your tritone. 3 whole steps. 3 whole steps above any note will give you the augmented 4 for the tritone. That's kind of where that term comes from. Okay, I've got another minute or two. Let's try a few more augmented intervals or diminished intervals. Let's try, starting with a B, what interval, or what note I should say, is a diminished third above a B?
D flat.
That's right, it's D flat. Can you talk us through the process?
I mean, I know a major would be a D sharp,
Okay.
a minor would be a D, and then so you just lower that a half step, D flat.
That's right. Do you see what he did? D sharp above here would be a major third. D natural then, lower a half step, would be a minor third. Lower that a half step more, D flat, and that would give us the space of a diminished third. So the answer is D flat. Yeah, good. Intervals are your friend. They can really help you a lot with music. You'll understand music so much better if you can understand and manipulate intervals. How about one more? What note is an augmented octave above a C? Now, octaves are over here on the left side of the chart. What note? Let's start with the perfect. What note is a perfect octave above a C? C. So how do I make it an augmented octave now?
Raise the C to a C sharp.
That's right. That's correct. It really is, I mean, if you kind of like this sort of thing, it's really fascinating. It helps you understand music so much. So much. The music that you read, the music that you perform. You know, and we're just scratching the surface here. And so there's a lot of wonderful information deep down in to understand the mysteries of music, so to speak. All right, so are there any questions before we get ready to go? So I did mention the specific assignment. You have certain sections on page 7 and 8 in the workbook, and 9. Please make sure you follow the assignment sheet so you don't do all of them. Just do the required 1 through 10 or 1 through 25 or what have you. That's for Friday, okay? All right, thank you. That's all the time we have.